Ready.
All right. Welcome to our second official episode of Between Two Dumbbells. I'm here with Professor Zach Zeigler. He's a professor here at Grand Canyon University. He is the head of GCU's research department. We have a club here called the Student Wellness and Health Association, SWAHA, and he really oversees all of that, helps us out in that department. He also has a PhD in physical activity, nutrition, and wellness from Arizona State University. He is the publisher or the author of two published books, the Weight Loss Bible and the 24-hour weight loss program. At home, he is also a husband and a proud father of 5. Zach,
Yeah.
how's it going today?
Awesome. Good. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Great, great. So you have a lot of background. You have a really wide scope in weight loss. So that's what I want to open up with and what I want to start talking about here. So we're just going to kind of run through how you got into that subject, how that became a good passion of yours, and then we'll dive deeper into the common hot takes of that topic.
Yeah.
So,
So I didn't starting school. I didn't necessarily know that I want to go weight loss 100%. But when you get into research, you have options to research something that can affect a lot of people, or get really deep into something that may not affect the average population. And the more into research I got into, and the more you look around what's going on in developed countries, and you see obesity rates going up, and everybody's trying to lose weight, you start to realize if I do research in this area, this is something that can affect literally everybody. I've never met somebody who has not tried to gain weight, lose weight, or maintain weight, right? And so because of that, that kind of gets you into it. And then when you start to learn a lot more of it and work in that field as a personal trainer, which I've done, or when I got done with my PhD, I started running a company. It's called Lifestyle Solutions, where we focused on extreme weight loss. And you realize, man, losing weight's not as easy as sometimes the fitness field makes it seem like it is.
mm,
And that's really what pushed me to kind of research more into that and to determine what can we do to help people trying to lose weight.
gotcha, gotcha. So starting with the overall topic of weight loss, and there's a lot of people trying a lot of different methods out there. Is there such thing as like a one size fits all weight loss program for an individual? And if not, can it still be specified or simplified to a certain extent?
Yeah, and I love that question because I think one of the myths is that the more you study about weight loss, you will find the best method. And I don't think that that exists. When you look at the success rates of people losing weight, about 80 to 95% of people that lose weight gain it all back, all of it. And when you look at the research on, okay, what is the best way to lose weight? Is it low carb? Is it low fat? There is not one way that is superior. I think there's some ways that maybe promote maybe quicker weight loss. Something might work better for a person. But the number one thing is if you can stick to that method, you're going to have success.
Okay.
That's it. So all of these things that we have, right? Intermittent fasting's kind of been the more recent hot thing. I look at them; they're all kind of tools in your tool shed that can be effective, but you got to choose the one that that person can stick to. So if you're somebody and you're like, I eat, yeah, I don't know, 400 grams of carbohydrates. I've done it my entire life. And if I sit here and say, okay, you need 0 grams of carbohydrates, I have zero faith that you will do that long term. You'll do it for 12 weeks, you'll lose weight, and then you'll say, screw this, and you're going to binge out on carbohydrates and you'll gain all your weight back.
Mm.
And so I don't, you can't say there's one way to do it.
So it's more so the one that you can stick to.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
100%. It is if you can stick to it, that's successful. So
Okay.
I've had people that have had success on a ketogenic diet, which can be successful. But I've had people that have had success on Weight Watchers, where the level of carbohydrates is way above what would put you in ketosis. The thing is, when you say, okay, I'm gonna never eat, and then fill in the blank. I'm never gonna have a carb. I'm just use that example. Whatever it is, the number one predictor of binging is dietary restraint. So when I say I'm never going to put this food in my mouth, what happens is you're strong for a few weeks. You go into the kitchen and that cookie's there that you said you'll never put in your mouth. You eat the cookie, and then what happens is it's called the abstinence violation effect. You have violated your abstinence of that cookie, so you say, "Screw this, my diet's over," and you eat the whole thing of cookies.
So people are almost convincing themselves that because they've messed up one time, they can just keep doing it. They've already lost, so they're just going to deepen that hole that they're digging.
Yeah, and if you think about it, it's foolish, right? One cookie didn't screw your diet up, uh, but in your mind, because you swore I'll never eat that cookie, you in your mind you're a failure and you're done, and that diet was worthless. So,
Mm.
in my opinion, a much better approach is let's find the diet that you can stick to, and usually in those extreme diets that you might stick to for 10 weeks and say you lose weight, nobody has been 5 years carb free. I've just never met someone who's like, I've never had a slice of bread for 10 years. Like, it just doesn't happen. And so then when they get done with this diet, and I'm not denying that they might have not lost weight during the course of the time they stuck to it. Now what are you going to do? And everybody says the same thing. I'm going to do lifestyle change. You haven't learned any lifestyle change. So tell me what that looks like. And that's kind of the problem.
Mm-hmm. I have one friend Derek, who's been able to do the no carb. At least he says he's done no carbs, and he
Yeah.
has the physique to reveal it. But
Right.
other than that, I think he's a superhuman. I think he's a freak. Everyone else is,
Right.
like you said, they just can't do it. And he's probably messed up. I sometimes I don't believe him myself.
Right.
But given these different diets, ketogenic, paleo, high carb, whatever you're looking at, do you think that people are genetically predisposed to better adhering to certain diets more than others, or do you think that's more so lifestyle behavior?
I think you're right, but I think the better way to look at it is, if you have somebody, when we look at why is it so hard to lose weight. So if you're someone who's overweight or obese, what's causing it to be so difficult, and there's a lot of people that have talked about the idea of this set point or whatever, but now we've learned a lot more about this, that the volume of fat that you have in your fat cell, that is what's being regulated.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is, if you were pretty chubby, and there's a difference between being chubby and just like hitting puberty late. Like, I was a chubby kid and then I hit puberty and got taller, and that was different. But if you were just you've struggled with weight your entire young adolescent life, you have developed so many more fat cells, double, triple even the amount than someone else who's been skinny. So now you're at the same, you're both 30 years old. You've struggled with weight your whole life compared to someone who hasn't. You have tripled the fat cells, and we have no way to get rid of them. And that's what's being regulated. So the problem now is, regardless of the diet that morbidly obese person wants to be on, once those fat cells get a certain size, it sends a feedback to the body saying, okay, we need to maintain our homeostasis. And that's when that person becomes more hungry. That's when metabolism will begin to slow down. Spontaneous movement will go down. So it's not the specific diet per se, but it's the fact that we're regulating what's in that fat cell. So I always talk about my brother. My brother was a twig his entire life. He got married, and someone bought him a KitchenAid. Him and his wife, a KitchenAid, you put all the ingredients in there, and voila, you get a cookie. They set out, their first goal as a married couple was to magnify this perfect chocolate chip cookie recipe. And he gained like 60 pounds. They had chocolate chip cookies every night. But he went on a diet and he lost weight like that, because genetically he didn't need to be obese, meaning he was lean his whole life, so he had a normal amount of fat cells. It didn't matter if he was on a low carb diet. It wouldn't matter if he was on a paleo diet or Atkins or whatever. He was going to be successful. So that's what is more needs to be looked at. Okay, let's look at you and your weight history and your genetic endowment from your parents. That's what's going to predict if you're going to be successful. Not really the diet. It's, okay, do you have the genetic ability to be successful? And we can predict that based off of childhood obesity in your parents.
Okay. So going back to that whole cell growth, hyperplasia, fat cells, is there a certain age in which the hyperplasia is very prominent and a certain age at which it stops, or is it pretty constant throughout one's life?
So once you're between the age of 1 and 20 is when we develop the number of fat cells that will be with us for the rest of our life. So if you are early teens and you're morbidly obese, you will struggle with weight your entire life because you can't get rid of them. Like we have bariatric surgery studies where people have lost 150 to 200 pounds, but the number of fat cells are exactly the same. And that's why 35% of people who have bariatric surgery gain their weight back anyways.
For sure.
And so really, if we're talking about intervening, that young adolescence is where we should be intervening to hopefully stave off the increase in fat cells.
And is that age of 20, is that a pretty hard cutoff, or is there a little bit of fluctuation depending on one's genetics?
I wish that we knew. We don't know. Like, it's not. We just know that the problem with this research is the only way to know this is fat biopsies. So we have to get people who want to let us make little incisions and take a sample of their fat, and hopefully from multiple sites. And to do it the best way, we get a group of people to do that, and we do it when they're a young child, and we do it throughout their entire life. And that data doesn't exist. So we make these age guesses at about 20 based off of lots of studies that have measured people at one time. So the age 20 is the best that we have. So is there a magical cutoff at 20? Probably not. But it's probably, around that point is probably when you're at the point where that's the number of fat cells you're going to have. So now when you're gaining weight as a 30-year-old, it's just the size is increasing.
Okay. And it wouldn't work with animal studies because they have cell hyperplasia for a different amount of time. Is that correct? And
100%.
they don't live as long as us.
Yeah, if you
Obviously.
take an average rat that we do research on, it's about a year, and so those numbers don't match. Having said that, though, it, if we look at rat studies and we expose these young rats to a lot of exercise, we do see the rate of hyperplasia to stave off. So there is some evidence through rat research that maybe we can exercise these young kids and stop the growth of fat cells.
Mhm. Okay. So now focusing a little bit more on the hormonal side of everything that plays into weight gain, weight loss. We know that calories in, calories out is how we ultimately lose weight, being in a caloric surplus or a deficit.
Right.
But do the hormonal factors that play in each person's weight gain or weight loss, does that depend on the person's genetics, or are there good patterns that you can kind of draw from one's hormones to determine their weight?
If they'll be successful or not.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go back to, because the number one drive, so our body fat's an organ.
Mm-hmm.
And if you view it like that, like we used to view our body fat as it's just this,
Just something benign.
yeah, we don't like to look at it, but it's just there. But now we know, no, it's not. And now a big area of research is what we call crosstalk, where the organ of the fat talks to the organ of the skeletal muscle and the other organs of the body. And so what happens is when that fat cell starts to shrink, that's when we send a signal to the hypothalamus, which will then send a signal to ghrelin, leptin, adiponectin. These are hormones produced from the gut, from our fat cells that provoke increased hunger. And so if we're saying, well, then what's predicting that? It's back to, okay, how many fat cells do you have? If you were big as a kid, you have lots of fat cells. So when you start to shrink, you have a hormonal change that will provoke you to be hungry. Sometimes we look at these people and we say, well, they're just weak-willed. They just need to tough it up. And I'm all about toughening it up and that kind of thing. But the reality is, well, if you look at their hormone profile, no, their hormones are being secreted in a manner that they are hungrier than someone else is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard to live with.
So a lot of these people are growing up, like you said, being told you just don't have the will to do it, when in fact it is actually more difficult for them to do objectively rather than just a subjective feeling.
Oh yeah, no, this is the hardest part. So if we look at, and this is hard for me to teach too, because personally I am right winged. You have control over your life if you want to pull yourself up with the bootstraps, and I believe that earnestly.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at someone that's struggling with obesity, there is this balance where you have the case that I brought up with my brother, where when he gained a lot of weight when he got married, that was his fault. He ate like a slob. He didn't go to the gym. And so you have those cases, but you have other cases where, let's talk about my little niece. It's my brother's sister, where my brother's wife, her whole family, the girls are all obese. And so she's just a big girl as a young girl. And she's done nothing to do that. She's just big. And so because she's so big in her puberty years, she has 3 times the amount of fat cells as somebody else. So although there are things she can do to control her weight, to tell that big girl that she has to be and then come up with some make believe weight, and those height and weight tables are make believe, like it's all made up. And so to tell that girl that she has to fit in there is the stupidest thing ever. If you look at the role of genetics, about 70 to 80% of someone's BMI is genetically determined. So I say this all the time. I lie and say I'm 6 foot. I'm not. I wear boots so that I can get close to 6 foot. But if I went to a doctor's office and they got my height and they're like, Zach, you're 5'11 and a half, go home and be 6 foot, we'd say that doctor's an idiot. But the same degree of genetics that contributes to your height is the same degree of genetics that contributes to my niece's weight. So when they look at my niece, they will go home and now be, and they come up with some make believe weight. That is just stupid. Her ideal weight is not the same as someone else's.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a hard disconnect in a field where, yeah, we want people to exercise and hopefully they'll lose weight. But some of those people will not lose weight. Mm-hmm. And they should be exercising still for health benefits, but they might not see weight loss.
Okay. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. And obviously from the perspective of the child, when I was 10 years old, I didn't know anything about nutrition. I just ate what was given to me. Right. So these kids don't necessarily have the choice at that young age because they're just eating what their parents are providing. How prevalent do you think socioeconomic status goes into this? And how much do you think that plays a factor on adolescent obesity?
A lot. If you look at, obviously the poorer areas have higher obesity rates, but much more important, I'm going to go back to my sister or my niece as an example, because this is key what you had just said. It is the family unit. Mm-hmm. It really is. And there's a lot of data to support this. In the country right now, we're all about, decreasing the importance of the family, and it's all the government will take care of you. Mm-hmm. Again, any societal ill that you can come up with, and obesity would be one of them, it stems there. So when you take the family and you break apart the family, so let's say that divorce rates, which they are high, now this kid is exposed to stress. Really good data that the kid being exposed to stress of all they've known with mom and dad, now they're split up. How does a kid cope with that? Well, a kid's not, oh, I'm gonna write in my journal, right? Or I'm gonna meditate. A kid, what does he do? Plays video games, watches TV, and eats food that makes the kid happy. And again, adding to that development later on. Or if you take a family that's just the parents just give the kids, soda in their bottle, stuff like that, that can contribute to it definitely. So now that kid is put in this situation where they are set up for kind of failure throughout the rest of their life.
Yeah. I mean, it's never my first thought about that, but the more you do think about how the nuclear family is starting to dissolve in this time, and then the obesity rates are just on the rise, like you're saying, it is interesting to find that correlation there and to think maybe this is a big factor that we're not really looking at enough.
Yeah, no, I 100% believe it. When you take it's your HPA axis, your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. This is the axis that dictates, okay, how much cortisol are you releasing? How about your epinephrine, norepinephrine? How much is being released? That's developed in young adolescents, and so meaning the experiences you have as a young kid dictates how sensitive you are to stresses later in life to release this hormone cortisol that promotes fat storage. And so when we have these kids in young life where maybe they were raised, whether it was a two-parent two-parent home where maybe they're fighting, or maybe it was a one-parent home with stress of mom not being able to provide, or whatever it is, the stress exposed to that kid. Now later in life, they're more sensitive to stress in the sense of cortisol's release. We're storing a lot more body fat.
Okay. So given these, I'm going to list a couple categories to
Yeah.
you. If you could just rank them as, and this is completely subjective, there's not a
Yeah.
lot of information, very broad, but if you could just rank them of biggest improvements to make versus not as important, even though I would say they're all pretty important. Factors for weight loss. So we would say controlling one's diet, one's sleep, one's physical activity, and one's stress levels. If you were to rank those four from most to least important, would you be able to do that? Or would you say they're all pretty equal across the board?
Um, Obviously, they all play a huge role. Every single one of them. Sleep is interesting. I would probably put sleep on the bottom, but let me tell you why. All the data suggests that the reason that we used to think that if you don't get a lot of sleep, the reason that leads to weight gain, because it does, is because of hormonal changes. Well, research hasn't replicated that. Now we know that if you're not sleeping a lot, let's say you stay up till 2 a.m, what are you doing in that time frame?
Eating.
You're eating. You're probably watching Netflix, binging some show, eating. So most of the sleep data suggests that the reason is it's just an increased opportunity to eat. So that's why I put it at the bottom. It's important, but if you recognize that, hopefully you can control that and say, okay, I'm not going to eat during that time frame. So diet would have to be number one, just because it's calories. And then I'd probably put sleep on the bottom. And then stress plays a huge role, obviously, with cortisol. In 30% of the population, when they're exposed to stress, they eat more. 30% of the population exposed to stress, they eat less. But if you're struggling with weight gain, that's not you. And then the other 40% don't change anything. And so for a lot of people, they do have a relationship with food where these emotions drive eating. During COVID, we published a paper that looked at the strongest predictors of weight gain during COVID, and stress was up at the top. And so that's obviously important.
Okay. I mean, I find it a little promising that they're all a little interconnected. For example, physical activity can be huge medicine combating stress. Sleep, also adequate sleep, can be helping with stress levels.
Yeah.
So just looking at how they're all interconnected, definitely I view that as a good sign, because when you can get them on the right track in one of those branches, you can get them to kind of follow that, and hopefully it makes a domino effect. But
I
yeah,
want to make a point to that, but that kind of goes to what we were first talking about when we say, what's the ideal diet? And then we brought up that term lifestyle change. When we put somebody on a diet that promises a solution like, hey, your problems are carbs, and I'm not anti a low carb diet. I think some people are successful there. But when we do that, we say, that's your solution. And they usually don't look at those other factors you listed versus saying, hey, your lifestyle is a problem.
Okay.
We need to go through that. And you're right. Hopefully they can play on each other.
For sure. And you said that a lot of times when that does happen, when they try to follow a trend, they end up gaining the weight back, and then they get in this habit of weight cycling. So when we look at general population, so people who aren't cutting and bulking for sport or competition, what are the dangers of that? Is it safe at all? And if it's not, what would you advise people do if they're stuck in that weight cycle habit?
Yeah. So the data on weight cycling is interesting because like if I was to ask you to define what that is, I mean, I think we could all say someone that loses weight and gains weight. But then I'd say, well, how much weight does it count to count as a weight cycle? And what if you gain the weight back over a year versus a week? Well, then how many times, if you've weight cycled, are you considered a weight cycler? So it gets hard because the definition is so broad. And so I'm saying that because the data is kind of split. You have a camp of people that believe, and this is the camp that believes that your body fat's going to kill you no matter what. And that's a second discussion. Do you even need to lose weight? And that's a separate discussion. But in that camp, they say that we think weight cycling is somewhat benign. Then you have another camp, which I fall into this camp, where I feel like there is enough literature to show that the weight cycling, that yo-yo dieting, it probably is increasing risk. Meaning you probably were better off staying at the weight that you were than going up and down, up and down. Most of the data as to why, when someone loses, let's say 10 pounds, it's not all 10 pounds of fat. About 2 pounds of that is lean body tissue, bone, muscle. Then you gain your weight back. And again, and you made a good point. Let's ignore athletes for a second. You gain your weight back, you're probably not in the gym gaining it back. So you gain 10 pounds back, but you didn't gain the bone and muscle back. So now your body weight is the same level, but your body composition is not. You've lost bone and you've lost muscle. And then you feel bad about it, right? Because you don't like the way you look or whatever. So then you do it again. And you do this repeatedly. You weigh the same, but you are a fatter person as far as measuring body fat. And the fat that's coming back, there's a lot of evidence to show you're gaining back more abdominal visceral fat, which we know is more cardiometabolically toxic anyways. And so there's a lot of good evidence to suggest that this fluctuation of weight is something that's not good for you.
Okay. And when they are losing the weight in that process, or hopefully when they're not going to cycle it back,
Yeah.
When you're trying to lose weight long term, and obviously you're more at risk of losing lean tissue, like you said, what are some things that or habits that you would instill to help prevent that lean tissue and bone loss?
Yeah, resistance training is one of the number one things. If you look at the stats, so for females, if we look at the United States, 50% of females last year actively tried to lose weight. So if we say, well, what percent males, it was about 30%. If we say, well, what percent of Americans were participating in the physical activity guidelines, it was about 15 to 20%. So that means that there's a lot of people that are losing weight and saying exercise, I don't need that to lose weight. I'm just going to do the diet. But the thing is, we have good data that if you're in the gym, resistance training, primarily heavy resistance training, there's even a study that had people eat 800 calories a day, which most people don't recommend that. But if you do that and you're doing resistance training, your metabolism didn't go down, which we usually would see, and you didn't lose any lean muscle mass. The other group that ate 800 calories a day, they did cardio, and we saw metabolism go down and they lost lean muscle mass.
Wow.
So being in the gym, hitting the weights heavy over the course of this weight loss program should stop that muscle loss that is seen in the average person.
Is there a number that you would define as heavy, like a percentage of a 1 repetition maximum?
Honestly, no. And this is why. We could go with 85%, which is what a lot of people recommend. But when I was younger, I always try to find, well, what's the best way? Like, what's the best percentage? If you go to the gym and you bust it, right? Balls to the walls as hard as you can, that's adequate. We just need to stimulate the muscle.
For sure. So covered that weight cycling. Now we're going to move on a little bit to any type of supplementation. Personally, do you believe that within the supplement industry, there are supplements out there worth taking that Gen Pop or athletic populations should be taking that we're deficient in, or anything that would optimize our training or even body composition?
No, I 100% do. The average, I want to start by saying, okay, how should you be analyzing this supplement? First of all, when you look at a supplement, say you want to do your research, you'll find a study that will show, maybe pick whatever the supplement is, it's had a significant effect. Usually in the supplement industry, the company that made that supplement is going to be hanging on to that language because it sounds very good, that this supplement had a significant effect. That word significant is a statistical term. You need to look at that, analyze, and say, does it have any relevance on me, on my physiology, whether it's bigger, faster, stronger? And that's a different story. So if we say what supplements have shown to not just statistically, but actually make me bigger, faster, stronger, there's very few. Creatine's tried and true. It has stood the test of time. Now we have all these, I always joke and call them magical creatines that everybody thinks that they need, and they're way more expensive. There's no good data to show that any of these creatine ethyl esters or whatever they are any better than creatine monohydrate. There just isn't. and creatine has been shown to be effective. So I always say, let's try creatine. And the nice thing is we don't have any good evidence that it's going to cause any harm. Maybe GI distress to some people. And if it doesn't work, then you're out $20. So it's not that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And then caffeine has stood the test of time. And the nice thing is the more we learn about, we used to think caffeine was only effective for aerobic athletes because it would shift and cause you to burn more fat for fuel, which is what an aerobic athlete would want. But now we know it's increasing neuromuscular excitability, decreasing perceived fatigue, meaning so that helps for endurance and power as well. Mm-hmm. And then protein supplementation. Well, we know that people losing weight, athletes must have more protein. There's a hot debate on how much more is more, but we know that they should have more. I always recommend 1.8 grams per kilogram. I feel like is a good sweet spot. People could argue that, and that's fine, but they definitely need more. So I always stick to those three. We know they're good. So that would be the tier one. And then you go to the next level and say, well, maybe there's some other supplements out there, HNB, beta-alanine, L-carnitine, where they may be effective, but the data isn't as good as that top tier.
Okay, for sure. Are there any cognitive benefits to the top tier supplements that you listed, creatine, caffeine, and protein?
So creatine, a supplement's effective when the more you study it, the more benefits you find, versus some other supplements, the more you study it, the more you realize maybe it's not that good. So creatine, we used to just say the original is, hey, creatine will increase creatine phosphate in the body to help you more explosive movements, and that's true. Now there's some data looking at creatine myostatin. Myostatin inhibits muscle growth, and there's some interesting data showing maybe creatine inhibits myostatin to cause increased muscle growth. And now they're looking at creatine as a possible using for Alzheimer's and cognitive function, with some interesting benefits showing that there. And so the verdict's still out, but the studies done on that does show that it could be pretty effective.
So as a student who's in school studying, if I were not physically active, wasn't planning on being physically active, but still a student for the time being, what do you recommend to someone like me to supplement with creatine? Would that help to a significant extent with any academic side? Or would it be more so just physical, a little bit cognitive?
I don't know. Again, this is the area that's kind of hot right now with creatine, is on its cognitive benefits. The interesting with creatine is, though, if you take, we know creatine is prominent in a lot of red meat products. So if you take a vegetarian, there's a lot of data that suggests a vegetarian will respond better to creatine supplementation than a big red meat eater all the time. So having said that, if you go back to your analogy, if you were deficient, I think there would be benefits. Now, if your diet was pretty on point, then I don't know if there would be if you're not, exercising or any of that. But if you're somebody where you're a traditional college student where you're eating like garbage, there may be some benefits there. And again, it is so cheap that it's like, give it a shot and see that if it's a benefit.
For sure. And last question on that, for dosage, would you stick to a 3 to 5 gram universal principle, or would you base it more on someone's body weight?
So old school thought was this loading phase. I know you didn't ask about it, but I want to bring it up. This loading phase of 20 grams a day and then cutting back down. Now the data suggests you probably don't need to do that, and that 5 grams universally seems to be somewhat effective. You can wiggle with it, but that seems to be pretty effective to where you just do 5 grams per day. Erring on the side of more, there's no harm in that. And so you can recommend to do that if you wanted to.
Okay. Is there still that belief out there, or I don't know if it's true or not, honestly, since it does retain so much water, you'll have to be drinking more water to protect your kidneys?
No, we have 0 cases where someone consumes some creatine and caused damage to kidneys. Okay. That just doesn't exist. Our body does have to filter it out. And so whenever that happens, and this is the same myth with eating too much protein, we always go to, well, is it going to cause damage to the kidneys? And that doesn't exist. The water thing, though, is important because creatine and carbohydrate have a synergistic effect on each other. Meaning if you consume creatine and carb together, you store more muscle glycogen, which for someone going to the gym, that's an adequate goal. Now, 1 gram of muscle glycogen stores to 3 grams of water, and so, which is a good thing. And so, yes, you want to be drinking a lot more water because you'll be able to retain more within the muscle inside the cell, intracellular, which there's no problem with that. That would be beneficial for someone going to the gym.
Okay, great, amazing. So we've covered everything that we had planned to cover for nutrition. I just want to talk about one more category here. I want to focus in on you personally and your work-life balance. You're very active here at Grand Canyon University. You're active in your church. You are with your family. You have a big family, so you have to be taking care of them. What are the biggest things or the biggest principles you would stick to help balance all those categories of your life?
Yeah, I think there's two. One is that word balance, and I've thought about this a lot. I think that it is like there's no such thing as balance. This is what I mean is if you think of it, when I'm at work, I'm at work. Like meaning I'm 100% focused on work. So by definition, I'm not balancing my family when I'm at work. I'm at work.
Mhm.
But now when I'm at home, I'm not at work, and I don't want to be at work
Mhm.
because and I love my job. That's why I'm here. I love what I do. When I'm at church doing church functions, I'm there. So I think that that is number one. You need to be present where you're at, and 100% committed to that. So that idea of balance, I don't really look at it that way. I say, okay, when I'm where whatever the hat is that you're wearing, whether it's a professor, a dad, a husband, a church person, whatever, when you are there, you need to be fully present to that setting and give it your all.
So to do it wholeheartedly, to not let any external distractions get in your way, um, and to really just, like you said, just give your all into each category, and then be present there
Yeah,
in each moment.
and then the next hard part is okay, which one deserves most of your time?
Mm-hmm.
There's a principle that I try to adopt called good, better, best. We have in the life that we live that's so busy, so many good things that we could fill our time with, and they could be good, lots of them. So we have this many good things, and we go down here. Well, what are better things? And then we get to your core beliefs on what are the best things, right? So when I say, okay, my best things are my family, right? My serving with my church. Those are the best things. That's what you need to spend most of your time doing is what you've decided is the best.
So that principle must help where if things do happen to overlap with work or family life, you're able to make the right decision because you know what is prioritized with your values. So you'll
Right.
be able to put that first.
So you're at home and then you get a call, and this happens all the time. I work
Mm-hmm.
with the College of Doctoral Studies here too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have about 70 doctoral learners that I'm on their dissertation committee.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they get my phone number and they're not supposed to, but they do. Now, I do think it's important to be I'm their methodologist, so I think it's important to help them. But when they call and I'm at home, it's that good, better, best. Taking that phone call is a good thing, but I'm at dinner with my family, which is the best thing.
Okay.
And that's the only way that you can do it, and then say, okay, I'm going to do this. And then when I'm at work, I'm going to help that learner who called me as much as I can, right? Put everything I can into that when I'm at work. And unless it's an emergency, if my kids call me at work, unless it's an emergency, I'm at work and I got to get that taken care of,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's, at least for me, that's kind of how I've had to try to balance different responsibilities.
For sure. So staying on that topic of conflict, but just focusing on work now. When there's conflict at work, whether it's between peers or coworkers, how do you feel is the best way to address that in the workplace?
Yeah. I think the first thing is saying what's our primary objective, right? Sometimes I think we're too quick to say you and I are not working together, so
Mm-hmm.
we're done with this, right? Versus okay, we're in this life together to grow and to become a little bit better. So let's have a coaching session or discuss it to where we can do that. I think one of the things that leads to this is we're obsessed with this word diversity. And we are. Most people won't even tell you what that means. But if you think about it, and I'll come at it from a Christian perspective too, like Christ never once said be diverse. He said be one. And so what I'm saying is if we say, okay, our focus, and I'm not saying you and I are the same person, and I'm not talking about the same skin color or any of this stuff, but I'm saying if we are one, and what's our objective here? So at work, our objective at Grand Canyon University is to teach our students in a Christian perspective and to put good scholars or trainers, whatever is out in the field. We need to be united in that objective, not diverse. We need to be united. That is our objective.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're united in our goals, I think we can overcome.
Mm-hmm.
But when we focus so much on diversity, it's like, wait, do we have diverse goals here, or are we on the
Mm-hmm.
same page?
I always find it funny how the harder decision to make is typically the right decision to make,
Right.
especially with certain people. But whether you have opposition or not, I mean, I don't know if you have any opposition in your life or nemesis or anything, but I feel like we all have that, maybe the person or the thing that's there, and to be able to kind of form that bridge
Right.
could just help us take that next step, whether it's academically or
Right.
in our career field, whatever we're doing.
Yeah. So I always joke with my students that I have a nemesis, and it makes life somewhat interesting to have a nemesis.
Okay.
And this guy, genius, and I shouldn't say his name, so I won't say his name, but he was on my dissertation committee, and the guy's very smart. I want to say he's from India, And in India, he was studying to become a medical doctor. And I don't know what happened between him moving to the States, but something didn't transfer over or whatever. So then he went to get his PhD. And he was at ASU where I was doing my PhD. He was on my dissertation committee, and we just butted heads.
Mm.
He was a tiny dude, and the only reason I bring that up is because I just wanted to pound his freaking face in. But the guy was very smart, but he was also so egotistical about it where he'd make you feel like a fool. And I developed, I mean, on my dissertation committee, he's sitting there while I'm defending at my defense, and he's writing notes to a guy next to him saying, has Zach had enough yet? And he forgot, and he hands me that dissertation. He forgot that he wrote that in there. And I'm reading through to look at notes, and I'm writing the notes he's writing about me. So I developed such hate for this guy. I mean, literal hatred. And we went to all these same conferences together. So I'd always see him and I just wanted to pound his face in. And it got to the point where it was doing so much more damage to me. Because I saw this guy and my blood boiled. And I got to the point where I finally, and not to get all like, I don't know, preachy, but I had to turn to God and say, okay, this is not a good feeling. This is not. And it took some time where I felt like maybe inspiration. I don't know. I said, what I'm going to do? I'm going to write him an email, because I did learn a lot from him. The guy was a genius. And I told him that in a letter, and I didn't lie and said, oh my goodness, I look up to you. I wasn't going to lie, but I just said, I appreciate these things. I listed out some of the things I did learn from him. And he responded back very collegially. It was very nice. And it did change everything. I don't love the guy, right? But it did change everything to where now, and I still see him. I have a part-time appointment with Luke Air Force Base right now. I took his position. And so we go to a lot of the same conferences with there, and I still see him, and we can work together a lot better. But I don't know if you heard the statement, don't chase the snake. If you step on a rattlesnake and it bites you, you have two options. You get mad, you chase that rattlesnake, but that poison goes to your body and it ends up killing you. Or you leave the snake alone and go take care of yourself. And I think that's it. And it has gotten a lot better to where that anger is finally gone. But
for sure. Just finding that common ground, realizing you're both in the industry to help people.
Right.
And once you kind of get past that, at least in my opinion, it's a lot easier to work with these people.
Right.
No matter how crazy some people in our field can be.
Yeah.
So last question here. You're obviously very busy. You have a lot of aspirations. Are there any big plans or goals that you have just in 2024 that you'd like to get to or like to finish up? Anything you're working on here?
Yeah. So when I got done with grad school, I had 4 books I wanted to write. 2 I've done. One of them, which I've included a lot of students in to help, is looking at the drug called exercise to try to sell. I always say we don't sell exercise good enough. We tend to only sell exercise for weight loss. And sometimes, as we've kind of been talking about today, that people get upset about weight loss and they say exercise was no good. So trying to sell exercise is better as a drug. And then the last one is the Lord's Law of Health. If God created our bodies, he probably knows what we should be putting in our bodies the best. And he's given us a lot of hints about that when we read the Bible. And so I'm going to try to put together a book that kind of goes over, okay, what has God told us about what we should put in our body versus what someone on Instagram has said. And so those are my goals. Obviously, I don't know if I'll get both those done in 2024, but that's kind of
for
where
sure.
we're headed.
And for your 2 books that are out now, where can people go to purchase those books?
Amazon. Yep, go to Amazon. They're there. And the first one, the Weight Loss Bible, was written for a class, so that's very heavily referenced. The second one, 24-Hour Weight Loss, is meant to be a workbook. So the first half of it is the information. The second half is a workbook to kind of fill. It's based off the idea of when we do these things, when we eat, when we exercise, that matters. Okay. Not just what we put in our mouth, but when. But Amazon's where you can get them.
Perfect. Well, that's everything we have planned for today.
Awesome,
as always, Zach, we appreciate your time, and we're looking forward to just talking with you more.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.